everyone, and welcome to this webinar with AssessFirst and Glassdoor. This is the first time we've done a joint webinar with someone else. I can see there's plenty of people who are registered in and listening to us. If you've got any questions, you're welcome to sort of tap them in, and we'll try and have a look at them at the end of the webinar and try and answer as many as we can. Just to introduce myself, my name is John Hughes. I'm an account executive at AssessFirst. For those of you in the webinar who don't know who AssessFirst are, we have created a platform which helps you analyze soft skills for candidates and employees, and it also enables you to predict success in a job or within your company and your company culture, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And also from Glassdoor, we have Brian. Brian, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, many thanks, John. Delighted to be here with you this morning. Hope everything's going well. So I work for Glassdoor, based in our Dublin EMEA HQ, and I'm an account manager here. My job at Glassdoor is primarily to ensure that our Glassdoor clients are consistently finding their own unique voice across the Glassdoor platform, and that may be through finding their brand awareness, increasing that brand awareness, or finding the right candidate for the right job, the informed candidate.
Thank you very much, Brian. So both of us are kind of going to go through perhaps the different sides of candidate experience, values and culture, and so on. What we're really talking about here is the idea that in today's climate, the candidate has the ability to find out more about you as a company, what your values are, your company culture, your working style. But do you also have the ability to look at the very same things in a candidate beyond the standard interview or the candidate's CV in order to understand what drives that candidate, who they are, and what they believe in? So if I kind of like to begin a bit just of the idea of culture, why is it important? Here you can see the chairman of Deloitte, who said, "Our research indicates that focusing on purpose rather than profits builds business confidence and drives investment. This underscores the significant impact a culture of purpose can play in fostering a thriving business community." So what he's actually saying here is culture, values, and sense create profitable companies, not focusing on turnover and money, for example. And several studies have been done on which this indicates how culture has an impact in 5 different areas. So first of all, financially, it affects your performance. Secondly, staff turnover, loyalty, an issue we deal with a lot at AssessFirst, is also affected. No one wants to stay in a culture that they don't like. Companies who have a strong belief in culture, a best practice, manage to reduce their turnover. And what's more, the fourth one, customer satisfaction is improved. Customers tend to be more loyal. And finally, quality is improved because a good company culture means employees tend to focus on providing excellent quality. And from a US study by Cotter and Heskett, here you can see the outcome of 200 companies that handle their culture well as opposed to those that do not. Those in red here that do saw a massive increase in revenue. You can see that on the first slide, compared to a quarter of that for companies with a bad culture. On the second one there, an increase in stock price, and the third, net income, with just 1% increase for those companies not paying attention to their culture, as opposed to a 756% increase from those that do. And if you get your culture right, you're going to find that turnover, attrition, employee loyalty will also improve. Studies have shown that companies who have an established value-driven culture, as opposed to those that are starting to implement it, have employees who are not only proud of where they work, they're also more likely to recommend that workplace to others, and they're more likely to stay there. The chairman of Deloitte, Sharon Allen, herself said, "By establishing a values-based culture, organizations can cultivate trust necessary to reduce turnover and mitigate unethical behavior. And the details are there. 9 out of 10 employees in well-established values-based cultures strongly agree that they will continue working there in 12 months' time. What's more, 46% of employees say that a lack of transparent leadership communication drives them to look for other jobs. In a How report from 2012, a study was done that indicated that 99% of employees of value-based organizations report that their company has very satisfied customers, compared with a 42% of respondents in organizations characterized by top-down command and control. A pretty startling figure in terms of pleasing your customers. And in terms of quality of work, often we can see that incentives such as salary, bonuses, training, etc., have very little effect in motivating and improving productivity in the long term. Instead, it's a value, it's culture, led at grassroots that helps to engage and drive employees to outperform. In a study of 800 managers working for companies at which the leaders had not created a positive culture, 38% reported that they intentionally decreased the quality of their work. So management style, culture, values all contribute to increasing your business in terms of profit, engagement, turnover, and quality. Which brings us to Glassdoor. As a recruiter, it can be tempting to think of the interview process of consisting of meeting a candidate and the recruiting process from that stage. But actually, this is the final step in a long line of actions that has led the candidate to you. Once they start looking for a job, once they see an ad from your company listing a vacancy, they now have access to an unprecedented amount of information that they did not have before. And I'm not talking solely about Glassdoor. Depending on the notoriety of your company, a candidate can look up your company's website, your blogs, your videos online, social media. They can ask amongst their peer group. All this means that your impact on a prospective candidate is enormous and all taken into consideration, and it helps them decide if they will apply to you or not. And what are they judging when they're looking at these pieces of information? They're thinking, can I see myself there? Is this the kind of organization I can imagine working in? Would I fit in? And when we ask the question, would I fit in, what we're really asking is, do I align myself with those values, this culture, the workplace, the management style? Does it fit who I am? And sometimes these kind of judgments are instinctual to a candidate. But as a company, it's important to realize that the candidate is thinking of themselves in terms of their natural working style, their natural talents, and who they are as a person. Brian, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, no problem at all. And I love that. It's absolutely right. It's not enough anymore now for a candidate to feel, okay, the salary is enough, or it's a certain distance from my location. People want to look at organizations and ask themselves, is this the place for me? Can I be myself here, no matter what that might be? And as we move on to the next slide, we'll see, John, that our world is evolving, and it's about organizations taking note of that. It's important that organizations are also evolving and aware of any changes in trends, because when you lose track of that, you may find yourself faced with new problems, certain problems that you may not have thought would have popped up before. And we see this in our own research. And as we move on there, John, we'll see that our own research has shown us that 75% say that attracting quality candidates, that is your single biggest problem. You're getting lots of applications coming through. That hasn't changed, but not the right ones, which means you have to sift through a ton of applications, and that doesn't necessarily mean finding a suitable candidate. This is actually generally it's a new problem to the industry. Strong candidates, well, they now have their pick of open roles, and this was not HR's biggest problem in the past, but things are absolutely changing year on year. So we really need to step back and ask ourselves, why is this happening? And that's pretty much what Glassdoor are doing and what we've always done. And to really understand this, we can just take a step back and we can look at the changes in today's candidates and their behavior. And as we move on, we'll see that we're always on, we're always connected. We're absolutely transparent all of the time about every single thing we do. We share our content and our pictures on social media. We follow influencers online, and we pretty much know everything there is to know about everybody. There's no such thing as a blind date anymore. All you need to do is a quick Google search and you find whatever you need to find. And people have taken this aspect and that approach and put it towards the job search and the employer as well. This information, there's so much of it. It's a wealth of data, but we've got to a point now where through that evolution, we rely on it. We depend on it to grow ourselves, where to eat, what to watch on TV, even what car to buy. You name it, we will research and look at it online. And the opinions of others have grown to a point now where some organizations may run multi-million dollar campaigns, but the opinions of others are far more evolved and far more important. We have evolved to be far more efficient. We share car rides, we share our homes, and we're increasingly sharing our intelligence and our data through open connected systems. So it made sense that the next step on that journey would be to do the exact same when researching and looking for work and trying to find an organization that fits our own skills and our own personalities. The catalyst obviously has been technology, usually is, and in particular the communications revolution. And it has absolutely profoundly changed the nature of HR, recruiting and talent. And we see a lot more how HR and marketing companies are really stepping up and saying, this is completely changing our brief and our agenda for the year, now that we know this is happening in the background. And this answers the question as to why 75% of recruiters say finding the right talent is their biggest problem. And it's because you're largely fighting over the same limited pool of real talent. And whoever gets it has a real, a true and authentic advantage with their company. And because attracting the right talent can literally mean the difference between success and failure for a department or a part of your organization. So you meet candidates online, on any device, in any location, and you're always on. Your employees, your candidates are as important as your own customers. So it's so imperative to get that right from the get-go. And I know it sounds like a lot of work, and it kind of is, it is a bit, but it's worth it in the end, because this sharing and networked economy has created something we haven't seen before. Highly informed candidates and at scale, because of the free flow of information. People now understand companies and where they belong more than ever before. People don't take a chance anymore. And it turns out that this level of informed candidate are far better employees as well. I can go into a bit more on the informed candidate in that our research shows as well that the informed candidate is a candidate who understands your company. They don't go into your organization hoping to learn when they get there. They want to go in with a certain knowledge from the start. And firstly, they will turn up for the interview and they are well prepared and asking pertinent and the right questions, which in return helps the interviewer to expand that interview experience. The informed candidate is a candidate that knows about the job role itself. They've done their research, the company and the culture and the values, and even the comp and the benefits packages that may be in place. Candidates that demonstrate that type of research and experience usually have the right expectations. They don't go into the company blind. They go in there knowing what to expect, which overall helps that company really make the decision on whether or not this person is the right one for them. The journey of the informed candidate and on Glassdoor, we aim at all times to make this as simple as possible. And it is a cycle. So it's about these insights that are on Glassdoor help attract a certain audience, and then that builds a community and they contribute to Glassdoor, and it goes on and on. And first and foremost, Glassdoor right now is a community of over 50 million people, and it's growing every single day. And job seekers, they log on to Glassdoor and they do their research for potential employees to understand if the company is right for them. But what most people don't realize is that Glassdoor is it's a give to get model, which simply means that a new user, well, they'll have to contribute to the platform, whether it's writing a review about their current or previous employer or adding details about salary or benefits, basically sharing as much content as they can to provide a kind of a wider Glassdoor experience. And once this job seeker has set up their account and shared their insights on platform, they now have access to our content to help them with their decision process. And content is generated in two ways. The employers themselves add their messaging to their profile, and they highlight what makes them great, what makes them unique. This is their own unique voice that I mentioned earlier, and also the content coming from the employer and what their experience rate has been within that organization. And some examples might be messaging about training and development, career opportunities, work-life balance, which we see as a specific important factor and time again. And content, as it's generated by the employees, it basically is given a sense that, you know, this is my experience in the company now, and if you were to come and do my job, this is what you would experience. This is how you would spend your day. And by doing that, that's cutting out the wrong person applying for the job as well. I mean, when we look at our users themselves, our data and our conversations always shows that, you know, sometimes there's a misconception that Glassdoor is there for reviews, and that's not the case. In fact, most people using Glassdoor are job seekers. They're there to look for new opportunities, and the platform is there to help them find a place that they want to work for. But they have an idea of the role they're interested in, and once they find that role, they can then look much broader. So this is what makes Glassdoor different to other platforms, where they can see a job they like, but they might not have a real insight into what's going on behind the doors. And I always say to my clients, you know, Glassdoor is if you've opened your door and said, this is who we are as a people and as a culture. It's not a duplication of our website. I'm not trying to sell you anything other than our personalities and who we are as people. And this is the reason why we now have, right now in the UK, 6 million job seekers every month. We're the fastest growing job site in the UK, and we're now actually number 4 on the job site listing. And we're continuing to grow day by day.
Thanks, Brian. It's worth adding also that as we increasingly see with the younger generation, used to making better decisions that Brian was talking about in terms of multiple sources and judgments, that they want to be better informed than ever. So they're looking for transparency, relevant content, culture, values, feedback from your company as soon as they've applied. And on top of this, millennials and younger people no longer have this sense that work is a place where they have to toe the line. On the contrary, people now see work as a place where they can be themselves, where it's an extension of their personality, that there's no difference between who they are at home and who they are at work. So the question you have to ask yourselves as recruiters, if they're looking for something they feel comfortable doing, what is that candidate's personality? What are their soft skills? And how can you best measure their talents? Now, Brian, you're going to talk a little bit about how people can improve their candidate experience in terms of showing their culture and values to different candidates online. Maybe you can go into that a little bit for us.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And it's so important that we make that candidate journey as easy as possible as well, especially when you're looking at a pool of, if you're looking for specifically skilled talent. And I think the key to improving the candidate journey is really just making it as easy as possible for job seekers to make a decision about you as an employer, for them to know, yes, this is it. This is the company that I want to put my time and my energy and my research time into. Or no, this is not the place for me. Maybe it's not the place for me right now, but I know I'm not going to go through the process of applying for this job. And we know, of course, as you can see on the screen here, no presentation is complete without a funnel, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And here you can see the various stages that through Glassdoor, a job seeker, but that they will go through, from becoming aware of the job at the start, all the way through to being hired. As we move on, we can look at this actually in a little bit more detail. I can break it down. So when we look at the awareness piece, now the awareness stage is simply put that this is where you're advertising your jobs in places where candidates are looking for them. And if you are, and your job descriptions are resonating with them, the client really just needs to get on board and make a decision if the place is for them or not. But there is a simple checklist to make sure that your jobs are being pushed out and being reached and read carefully. And that's pretty much by using straightforward job titles. Don't overcomplicate the job title itself. Be succinct. Avoid long paragraphs and use bullet points and subtitles. Shorter is better, especially we know that a lot of our users are using us on a mobile platform as well. Showcase your company and your culture, these benefits and how the role ties into your mission statement. This is an opportunity to stand out and show what you're doing differently. Don't shy away from that in your job descriptions. And describe the exciting products candidates may be working on. Give that candidate an idea of the future of where that role itself could be going. And of course, having links to videos and reviews, they'll describe your company in far more detail. And again, it seems like a bit of work, additional work, but it's a unique angle because you're not just discussing the job, you're also discussing yourselves. What you don't want is the wrong person applying for that job. The consideration piece itself, this is so important. On Glassdoor, absolutely, the ratings are so important. They want to feel good about the decision that they're going to make. They want to feel that they're going to a good company to work for. And I guess what's even more important to job seekers is ensuring you have content that is relevant to them. So for example, if you focus on graduates, as you alluded to there earlier, John, this is then a no-brainer that you would have your messaging on your career site around graduates. So therefore, on Glassdoor, we'd always encourage people to do the exact same thing. If you're looking for a specific talent pool, if I'm looking to attract women in technology, which is always a tough area to fill, I want to make sure that my Glassdoor profile is showing all the wonderful work that we are doing with women in technology. This again is broadening that net of who you're going to attract into the overall role itself. And to remember it's important to remember that the content again is generated in two ways. It's yours and the employees who currently work there or who have currently worked in your organization. So therefore, it's so important to have an internal engagement strategy in place that your employees are familiar with Glassdoor, familiar with that research and process, and that they can give their feedback and their voices are also appreciated. An interview. You know, it's so funny. We speak to a lot of clients, and they've gone through all this process, and the skilled candidate has gone through all this research and all this work, and then the interview falls at the last hurdle. And it's so disappointing because it's such an important area. And you know, they've made it that far. The candidates research your company, but the interviews, let's face it, they can be awkward interactions. So the key is to be prepared. Printing off a client CV or an interview, a potential client CV on the way to interview is not enough. And the candidate can always tell if you're reading their CV for the first time. I think we've all been in a similar situation where, remember as well, when you're interviewing them, they're also interviewing you. Don't lose sight of that. Ensure your interviewers have been fully trained on how to conduct an interview. Whether it's on phone or in person, but walking through the process with the candidate so that they know what to expect during the interview will help them relax, and you get to see who they really are. So I think an interview shouldn't always be a case of a templated process. Make sure that you've also done your research on that potential employee, and that you're tailoring your interview for them in order to get as much as you can out of them. And if the candidate is meeting several people, make sure that you have multiple sets of questions to broaden that overall conversation and make it more interesting for the candidate as well. And at the end of every interview, there will be next steps. This is a given. Some candidates, well, they will come right out and ask, while others will normally shy away. but it's important for interviewers that you outline what's expected when the meeting is completed. And obviously avoid sharing early feedback if you can. But it's such an important factor because, as I said, we get a lot of feedback saying we get people for interview, but it just fell short. Something wasn't right. They weren't interested in us. And then we'll see the interview reviews on Glassdoor, and we'll see, okay, this is where it fell down. The interviewer themselves actually dropped the ball. Maybe they weren't prepared. One thing is always important is that, we talk a lot about the informed candidate, and the informed candidate are the ones who are more likely to be hired. They're more likely to be hired because you can see a sense in them that they're there because they want to invest in your organization. But not only that, candidates at that level who've done that type of research and investment before they even work for a company, we see are more likely to actually stay working for you in the long run. And of course, that cuts down on attrition, which, as you know, is an expensive and timely process as well. So it's very important to never underestimate that informed candidate on Glassdoor.
Brian, thanks a lot for all those really interesting points. We're going to come back to you a little bit later when we get some questions through about some of the things that you've spoken about. From my point of view, the question for me after all those points that Brian raised is, has the candidate actually got one up on you as a recruiter and as a company? Because they actually have access to so many different points of view, as Brian pointed out, as to who you are as a company, what your culture and values are, but you as a company know nothing about them in terms of the same things, other than a list of skills and experiences that are listed on a CV. Can you, as a recruiter, also understand who they are, how they will behave in your company, what drives them, what their beliefs are, and how they think? How do you choose attitudes and values coherent with who you want or need to become in order to attract the right candidate? And what's more, how can you make sure that just as a candidate does with you on Glassdoor, that you're hiring based on values, on culture, on attitude, on who that person really is? And how can you make sure also that you resist the urge to hire the wrong person for your culture because the pressure's on to find someone? You can do it before you've even decided to meet or shortlist that candidate. We believe in order to properly understand the core values of someone, you need to look at these 3 pillars of soft skills which help to best identify who that person is: their reasoning, their motivation, and their personality. And we at AssessFirst have developed 3 evaluations for you to measure this accurately. First of all, we have BRAIN, to understand their mental agility, how that person thinks, how they react to information, their learning style and decision making. DRIVE, to best understand someone's preferred activities in work, what kind of culture they want to work in, what management style they're looking for, and what rewards they're looking for. And finally, SHAPE will tell you what someone's natural working style is like, how they work with others, and how they cope in a more stressful environment. If you evaluate all 3 together, we can tell you who someone is, their natural attitudes and behavior to match with your culture, what they do better than any other person. And once you've understood who that person is, what their natural attitude is, AssessFirst can help you identify if they fit to your cultural model. Meaning, we do this in a really simple way. As recruiters, we can say, if you have people applying to work with you, you can create a predictive model which will help you to see where each new candidate matches your values and culture. What's more, we can create a model where you get to pre-screen and identify those people most closely aligned with who you are as a company. So you can actually start to understand the candidates in the same way that they understand you with Glassdoor. So here you have an example of our predictive models. And what you can do is you can go in, you can give it a name. We can call it My Culture, for example. And we give a series of questions to help you identify exactly what it is that you're measuring when a candidate is taking the AssessFirst evaluation and coming in trying to apply for your company. So you can create a predictive model that is particularly defined in terms of the kind of culture that you have within your company. So we ask you, are you looking for someone who's going to self-create and self-develop, or are you looking for someone who takes care of existing tasks? Are you looking for someone who needs to deal with very complex ideas, average or moderate? How heavy is the workload? Will they have to invest more than 100%, or is it a standard workload? Back onto culture again. I mean, this is at the heart of it. What kind of atmosphere is there in the company? Is it one of competition, or is it one of collaboration? What kind of context is your company in? So is it one of stability? Is it one of change? So you need a candidate who's able to deal with change. Or at the extreme end of that, is it one of complete disruption, where there's radical changes all the time? And what happens is we create a predictive model here based on those questions that we've asked you in terms of your company culture, where you can see the different areas, those areas in green, where we're measuring certain characteristics within that candidate to see whether they're a fit in terms of your company culture. We make it practical. So if you want to launch one of our evaluations, it's really simple. You add someone's email, you click go, takes around 10 minutes to complete our assessments. And in order to find this cultural fit, this is the kind of information you can find out about a candidate that's already assessed your company culture, environment, and values, as Brian was talking about, to see if they match your own vision. So here are some of the details we can give you concerning each candidate. For each evaluation, an employee or potential candidate will receive a synthesis of their skills. So a talent cloud, bringing out their strong traits, their natural talents. So here we can see demonstrates dynamism, design strategies, demonstrates proactivity, details of how that person likes to work, how they work with others, and how they deal with stress. We give these talent tags, giving the candidate a very positive feedback concerning who they are. For drive, in green, we talk about what motivates that person, and in red, what demotivates them. What activity that person prefers to do, what kind of environment that person wants to work in, what kind of management style is needed, and what kind of culture that person prefers to work in. Back onto this word culture, but drive as an evaluation is essential for understanding how to manage and motivate a candidate. But not only that, the information here is exactly what you should be looking at to see if that candidate would thrive and succeed with your company values. And with brain, we see how someone thinks, their learning style, how they react to information. But it's not to be thought of as an IQ test, but it's more a way of seeing how they think on their feet, their mental agility. What's really important for us is that everyone who takes AssessFirst evaluation feels empowered and that they get the same feedback as recruiters. So anyone who completes our questionnaire will receive a summary that looks just like this. And you, as recruiters, have access to this information, as well as detailed reports in order to fully understand their attitudes and behaviors. And here's where it gets interesting. What you can also do is on our platform is go on to predict success. And that predictive model that we made earlier, specific to your company culture, you can pull out when you have the profile of someone, and we can give a scoring. We can predict how well we think that person would succeed within the company culture as predefined by you on our platform. So we have a scoring. We always say that any sort of scoring from 60% or upwards is a sign that someone has a good potential to succeed within your company culture. We go into their details in terms of their shape, their drive, and their brain. We can go into details in terms of their personality radar, what kind of traits they have, again, which fit in with your company culture and where they don't fit. And we can talk about their strengths and weaknesses in terms of that cultural fit that you have already defined. And what's more, not just looking at one individual profile like that, what you can also do is, whether you've got a list of people who already work with you or a list of candidates who are all applying for the same job. And again, as Brian was talking about this in terms of going through their CVs and finding out who's a good match for you. What you can actually do with AssessFirst is if you've got 20 people, 30 people, 50 people, 100 people, you can filter them to see who is the right match for your culture as predefined on our platform. You don't have to do it just by culture. You could also access all our different job benchmarks that we have on our platform to, again, see whether they would have success in terms of doing the job. It's important to think about what you're doing when you're looking at people in this way, because you're trusting science, you're trusting algorithms. It's anti-discriminatory, it's transparent, it's without bias. You're not looking at their age, their sex, their school. You're simply looking at how well displaced they are to fit in with your company culture. And this is at the heart of the webinar today. Good quality candidates are also evaluating your company during the recruiting process. Every person they speak to, from a recruiter to an employee, they're evaluating, judging, considering if this is the place they want to work. They're looking at team and at culture and the amount of time spent at work. So we want to ask you as recruiters, how are you looking to understand candidates as to who they are and potentially who they could be? So this is why we're talking about soft skills, something that reveals the real beliefs and values of an individual, so you can get the right fit for your company by recruiting on mindset rather than on skill set. We know that a CV is not a good mirror of someone's skills, and that past experience is not necessarily a good indicator of future performance. So in order to truly understand a human being's strengths, you need to rely on science and algorithms to tell you in a factual way, in an unbiased way, what that person is, who that person is, what they can do, how they do it, and what they could do in the future. At AssessFirst, we help you achieve success, but we help you achieve success in the long term. So anybody who works with us, we like to have a look at the effect that using our platform has had on their recruiting, 6 months down the line, 1 year, 2 years down the line, so we can kind of see the effect that it has when you are recruiting, as I said, in terms of mindset as opposed to skill set. The general stats that we have on this is when you're recruiting in this way, that you will see that performance can increase by 15%, because it follows that if you have someone who fits in with your company culture, they're going to perform better, as we saw from the stats at the beginning of the webinar. Secondly, we can actually reduce hiring costs by 20% because it allows you to pre-screen and have a quality interview with people who are a good match for you. That's sort of linked to this minus 30% in terms of how long it takes to recruit, because you can quickly pick out those people that are well aligned with your company. And we can reduce turnover significantly, again, because if you find someone who's the right fit for doing the job, they're going to stay longer, they're going to perform better, they're going to be happy in their job and give you better quality. You don't have to take it from me. You can also see the different people that we work with. So we work with Burger King, who said that since we've been using AssessFirst, we cut the attrition rate by 50% on all our managerial positions. We work with a large department store, which is called BHV in Paris, which is like Selfridges or Liberties. And they said, thanks to AssessFirst algorithms, we now recruit in under 30 days instead of 45. And we reduced our attrition rate by 50% and increased our revenue by 11%. And we work with Carrefour, which is a large supermarket in France and Spain and Italy, who actually use us for internal development. And they said our partnership with AssessFirst helped us to create development plans for each and every employee in the company. We have 3,500 customers in over 30 countries. Over 5 million people have done our evaluation. And again, you can see here some of the different companies that we work with. We work with Zara, we work with Accor Hotels, we work with Airbus, we work with Total, we work with Ingenico. We also work with various different consulting firms from Morgan Phillips and Hayes. And we also work with universities who assess graduates and look at their potential for people who have less work experience. So thank you very much for taking part in the webinar. Brian, thank you to you as well.
No problem, John. Thank you very much. Delighted to be part of it.
Yeah, a real pleasure to have you here. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask, you're welcome to go ahead. Brian, I'm hoping you can help me. I've got one here, which is saying, I've been discussing with other people in recruitment recently about the idea that cultural fit is just another way to maintain the diversity of a company, i.e. attracting the people that are the same as you. This is fine if you already have a diverse workforce, but if you want to increase diversity, perhaps we should be looking for culture add, what this person can add to our culture, rather than whether they fit in. What do you think we can do to assess culture add? Do you want me to answer that, Brian, or do you want to, have you got something you want to add on that?
I think it's a great question. I think that it's on the point as well. Having a cultural fit, if you have a restrictive culture, you're going to end up pretty much repeating the same processes over and over again. And that culture add point is great. It's really key because it's about finding that diverse workforce. So having somebody who comes in who is a cultural fit, maybe in line with objectives and mindset and enthusiasm and their integrity, is great. But a culture add is so important as well, because we want to make sure that your organization is reflective of the world outside your door, which means that you have diversity in gender, you have diversity in background and culture and sexual orientation. So the culture add piece is so important. And the conversation, that person's absolutely right. It doesn't just stop at cultural fit. It does go in the cultural add direction as well.
Yeah, I would say from AssessFirst points of view on this, in terms of doing it through testing and doing it through evaluation, when you're looking at people in terms of do they fit these kind of traits, or do they fit this kind of company culture that we've got, you won't necessarily get exactly the same people. You can get people who are very, very different in terms of who they are, in terms of their age and their sex and their diversity, in terms of the things that they like, in terms of the hobbies that they do, in terms of the kind of person that they are. But there will be certain characteristic traits that are linking them, meaning that it's going to work for them when they get into your company. But it's a very good question, because you want people to fit into your culture, but you also want it to be diverse and interesting and have lots of people's points of views. I've got a question here. Someone saying, will you be sharing this presentation? Once it's done, we're gonna get it up on YouTube later today. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me at AssessFirst or Brian at Glassdoor is welcome to do so as well, and we can send you through the link. But yeah, we'll try and send you all the link to the presentation once we got it up online, if anybody wants to have a look at it. I've got another question from the same person who says, can this be done without interviewing? I'm assuming he's meaning our evaluation. And yes, absolutely. I mean, I hope I showed that at one point. If you've got a job advert online, if you've got somebody who's applying to your job, you can have a link from our platform. And what it means is someone clicks on to apply for the job. They would go through, take our evaluation, and you would actually receive all the candidates filtered, as I showed you before, in what we call a recruitment campaign, so that it'd be really easy for you to pick out 4 or 5 people who've got an interesting scoring, to say, okay, I'm going to meet these people for an interview because we can already see that they're well aligned with our culture, or they're well aligned with a certain job position. And remember, it's a recruiting aid. It's a tool. It's not a crystal ball, but it will give you far more information on that person than reading their CV, calling them up. It's going to give you solid, scientifically based information on who that person is, what they do best, and how they will be when they come into your company. So yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And then what you can focus on as a recruiter, all those points that Brian was talking about, is doing a good interview, really understanding who that person is, and spending more quality time picking out people who you know are well suited for the job already. I have more questions here. How do you assess the culture of a company, Brian?
It's actually a good question, because a lot of organizations that I've spoken to, they wouldn't know what the culture is. They would think, we don't know what culture, what is it? And remember as well, a lot of employees and new employees, they're not going to come in to your company and be all guns blazing. They're going to step back and they'll wait for you to set that tone, and they'll wait for that temperature check to see if they can be who they can be. And sometimes if the organization doesn't provide the necessary platforms, you may find yourself in a kind of a stagnant culture where it's quite generic and bland and beige, and you're not quite sure what it is. So the best thing to do is make sure that as an organization that you're enabling the right platforms for anyone to come on board. And the best way, of course, if you're a company of a certain size, is to look maybe at the employee resource group angle, other groups internally for women in business, for your LGBT groups, other groups for single parents, for remote workers. But when you do that, or when you make your employees aware that those platforms exist, and it could even just be a chat room, or it could be a meeting or a tea once a month, but once your employees know they exist, then you'll see that culture develop. And that will give you the guidance on what your culture is, and is there a certain sway towards one area, and then that will then in turn help you identify maybe the gaps of where you need to focus on your culture. But it's important that you can't just sit back and say, well, what is a culture? I don't know. You have to, as an organization, enable the right facilitations and platforms for the employees to, I hate the phrase, but it is a bit like come out of your shell and show who they really are, because they will sit back and wait for you to guide them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really good question. How do you assess the culture of a company? And then as Brian has also said, do you want that culture to change? From my point of view, I would say that the only way to do that is to actually talk to your employees. I mean, you can get a little bit of a sense of it even on Glassdoor. I mean, you see it there. But talking to your employees will give a lot of information. And I am duty bound to say, you can also assess it by evaluations. You can have your team who are already working with you take the AssessFirst evaluation, and then you can start to see certain kind of cultures, certain kind of traits, certain kind of things that are already there, and even our science team can help you kind of assess, okay, what kind of culture do you have there? What kind of best practice do you have? How do you want to improve it? How do you want to change it? So, I mean, measuring something is extremely important before you can go in and then actually say, how am I going to measure other people coming into this culture? So, yeah, that's a huge question, but a very good one. I got another one here which says, how accessible is the platform for individuals who have additional needs? I guess that's a question specifically about AssessFirst. We try and make it as accessible as possible. If you sort of go on to AssessFirst and try out the evaluation, which anyone can do for free, you can just go and click on and see what it's like. If what you've hopefully seen in the presentation is the questions we ask during the evaluation are really simple and very clear. We try and make the design as ergonomic as possible. You can do it online. You can do it on your mobile. We try and, for recruiters, we try and make the reports and our predictive element as clear as possible. That's not bogged down in sort of scientific speak. You don't need any training in order to understand it. So we try and make it as accessible as we can. Another question here. How would you differentiate your product with psychometric testing? Again, this is for me. My apologies, Brian. I'm not just picking them because they're for me. I'm just going through them. How would we differentiate our product? Hopefully, I mean, we've only had a sort of an hour here, and I can't show everything, but hopefully you can see. From one point of view, we do psychometric testing in terms of we're saying we're doing a test of who that person is, right? And we can give reports on that kind of idea. But the big difference that we do is what we call predictive recruitment, meaning that we can then take that information and say how well that person would do in a job, in a specific job role, if you want. We can say how well someone will work with a manager. We can say how well they will do as part of a team. And then, as you've seen, as I've tried to show today, we can also say, okay, is this the right cultural fit for your company? Is this person leadership material? Is this person high potential material? Is this person an A player? And so on. There's many different things that you can do with the platform beyond what you would consider a classic psychometric testing. Let me see if I can go through. I don't want to pick all the questions because there's quite a few others here. Someone mentions here, I guess a good way to find out company culture is also to get in touch with employees and ask them targeted questions about management style, work atmosphere. Exactly, that's sort of what I mentioned before. Someone else says also look at company core values, which behavioral traits are used for. A great point. Culture is also role specific, says one of the guys in here, and I agree with that completely. And again, that's something that that we deal with on AssessFirst. You know, when I said you can have a look at how someone would do for a certain role. When I talked before about whether an atmosphere was one of collaboration or one of competition. Within one company, you could have the sales guys who are all working within an atmosphere of competition, but you might have the finance team or the IT team are working within a culture of collaboration, of course. So absolutely, culture is different by role. I got one more here which says, once a person has completed the online assessment, I'm sorry, Brian, it's another one for me. Can this be updated as their skills evolve, or is the initial test set in stone? No, it's not set in stone. With the companies that we currently work with, we often advise that they ask people to take it each year. Now, you know, there are going to be certain characteristic traits. If someone is very strong in terms of, I don't know what, being assertive with others, if they've got that very strong, when you assess them the next year, it's probably going to be pretty similar. But what you might see that after the work experience and so on, or a year has passed, that those people have changed in terms of their attitudes to certain things. And what I would definitely say is that you know, someone who is 20 years old is going to be very, very different to that same person when they're 26 years old, 27 years old, after they've had quite a lot of different work experience. That looks like it. I've got other questions here, such as how much does this cost and things like that. I would say if you're interested in those ideas, get in touch with me at AssessFirst. My email address is jhughes, so it's HUGHES at AssessFirst.com, or you can just click on our website and get in touch with us. Brian, I don't know if you have any other points you'd like to add before we finish up here today.
No, that's it. John, thank you so much for letting us be a part of this today, and thank you as well to all of the attendees. Love doing it, and much appreciated. Yeah,
me too, Brian. I really appreciate Glassdoor being in there with us, and everybody who was online and shared the questions and shared in the webinar today. Thanks a lot, and hopefully you'll come back when we do the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.